Hey guys, I wanted to add one little thing to my previous response to lengthyounarther. I know it wasn't long enough, right? So in Left Libertarianism, Class Conflict, and Historical Theories of Distributive Justice by Roderick T. Long, Roderick has a section that I just think is so fantastic, and it exactly responds to lengthyounarther on his ridiculous stuff about if cooperatives are so good, why don't they exist in the current marketplace? That I really have to just quote them at length, and that's all I'll really do here. So just want to do that. So Roderick says, quote, it is often assumed that the domination of the economic landscape by large firms is to be explained simply by their successful exploitation of economies of scale. But as Kevin Carson, has stressed, in addition to economies of scale, there are diseconomies of scale, which beyond a certain point will offset the economies and put a limit to the firm's growth unless the firm can make use of government privilege. For example, the augmentation of productive capacity associated with larger size requires a wider area of distribution for the increased product. Thus, as production costs fall, distribution costs rise until the latter overtakes the former. But this check on firm growth can be overcome once the government enables the firm to socialize its distribution costs. At the extreme, such a socialization can take the form of opening foreign markets via gunboat, but its many milder forms include public funding for highways. As is well known, long-distance shipping via heavy trucks is responsible for the vast majority of wear and tear on the public highways, yet firms that rely on such shipping do not bear a proportionate share of the tax burden for building and maintaining highways. Hence, such firms are able to grow beyond their natural size by getting the taxpayers to pick up the tab for their transportation costs, while the more economical alternative of local production for local use is rendered artificially expensive inasmuch as it is compelled to subsidize its competition. Moreover, as firms grow larger and more hierarchical, the separation between those who give the orders and those who do the work increases, thus making it harder for any of the firm's participants to know what is actually going on. Moreover, the increasing insulation from decisions from market feedback not only make information harder to obtain, but also lowers the cost of abusive or inane behavior by managers, thus giving the corporate wonderland familiar to readers of the comic strip Dilbert. Thus, the lowering of the transaction costs associated with the firm's centralization is offset by the cost of the growing informational chaos within, rendering such firms unable to compete against smaller, flatter rivals, unless competition from such rivals can be curtailed as it is quite effectively by government regulations, such as licensing fees, zoning, uniform quality standards, capitalization requirements, and so on, all of which place a disproportionate burden on smaller companies and independent entrepreneurs. In particular, the establishment of workers' cooperatives as an alternative to the hierarchical firm has been rendered artificially difficult both by these regulations and by ostensibly pro-union regulations whose real and successful intent was to divert the labor movement's goals away from worker control of industry and towards mere pottage of higher wages within the existing capitalist framework. In in his arguments against workers' cooperative, Nozick himself seeks to slide into a bit of vulgar libertarianism, taking their scarcity on the prevailing corporatist market as evidence of their inefficiency, as Lengthyounarther did, as though the prevailing corporatist market were a reasonable proxy for laissez-faire. Nozick discusses some genuine incentival problems faced by worker-owned firms, 1974, pages 250 to 253, but does not address the incentival and informational problems faced by traditional hierarchical firms. If worker-owned firms are efficient, he asks, why don't we see more of them? He seems not to consider one obvious answer. As Carson reminds us, quote, the state subsidizes the large hierarchical capitalist enterprises against which cooperatives compete, thus consider rendering them artificially profitable and competitive against alternative forms of organization, end quote. Carson, 2009a, page 518. Konkin, Samuel Edward Konkin III, by contrast, was of the opinion that, quote, the whole concept of worker-boss is a holdover from feudalism, end quote, rather than a natural outgrowth of the free market, and speculated that, quote, independent contractors might replace, quote, wage workers for, quote, all steps of production. Konkin, 1983, page 25, number 8. An idea that goes back to Herbert Spencer from his Principles of Sociology, 1896, Book 7, Chapter 20. David Friedman, though not usually considered a left libertarian, has expressed similar sentiments in Friedman 1989, pages 144 to 145. More recently, Carson has devoted two lengthy books, 2000 and 2009a, to an attempt to show that worker cooperatives would tend to displace traditional capitalist firms under a free market. Moreover, both Rothbard during his left libertarian phase and Karl Hess have argued that by strict neo-Lockean standards of land ownership, most of the property claims of the corporate elites are illegitimate and might justifiably be homesteaded by their employees to form worker cooperatives. In any case, the historical approach to justice and holdings lead naturally towards a presumption in favor of working control of industry, as Schmidt's 2005, page 170 puts it, quote, Nozikians tend to see rewards, i.e. products, as created by workers, and thus presumptively belong to workers. It seems like lengthyounarther has a big hang up, a big Nozikian hang up about worker tending firms, and I really don't think that just because they don't exist in the current market that really means a damn thing. After all, we don't live in a free market, so why the hell would it matter that there's not a lot right now, or there hasn't been in history? Have we had a truly free market in history? I don't think we have, so why does it matter that none has ever existed? It really doesn't. And I think this shows lengthyounarther's vulgar libertarianism, and I know it's not nice to name call, and I'm not like doing this just to make fun of him, but I mean, all that evidence really backs up what I said. Now, if you don't believe me about the transportation subsidies, I'll have a link about that. If you don't believe me about the corporate hierarchy being inefficient, I'll link something about that. And there are a few other links. I'll go back on the quote, and I'll look at it, and I'll link them in the description as well. But yeah, I just wanted to add this because I think this is so brilliant by Roderick. I just happened to be reading this. I wasn't looking for anything to further prove my points, but there you go. I mean, I really think that you need to look past the current economy and stop vulgarizing market relations. Lengthyounarther. This is a real problem with right-wing libertarians, which I unfortunately think you are. And it's really not that you appear like a right-wing libertarian. It's because you are.